She was the girl the entire realm knelt to obey. The first woman ever named heir to the Iron Throne, with every great lord in Westeros sworn upon their honor to see her crowned. And yet she would end her life given to the fire of a dragon, her last living son forced to watch, while the small folk who had once adored her cheered her ruin. In a single terrible year, she lost 3 sons, her husband, her dragon, and her crown. From the realm's delight to a name spoken in curses, her fall was the most complete in all the long history of her house. Born in 97, after the conquest, devoured at Dragonstone in 1-30. After the conquest, this is the complete story of Rhaenyra Targaryen. But was Rhaenyra a hero wronged by oathbreakers, a monster who became the very tyrant she fought, or simply a woman crushed beneath a crown the world would not let her wear? Hold that question. By the end, even the histories could not agree. Welcome to Westeros Within, where we journey into forgotten ages, hidden legends, and ancient mysteries, heroes and monsters of Westeros. This is Rhaenyra Targaryen, the realm's delight, devoured. She came into the world in 97, after the conquest, the only surviving child of Prince Viserys Targaryen and his lady wife, Aemma Arryn. Aemma was herself of dragon blood, daughter of Lady Daella Targaryen, and her marriage to Viserys was a union of cousins, as was so often the Targaryen way. But Aemma's body betrayed her again and again. Miscarriages, stillbirths, and one small son named Balon, who lived less than a day. Of all her children, only Rhaenyra endured, and so the girl became precious beyond measure, the single bright hope of a grieving father. In 101, after the conquest, when she was but a child, a great council gathered at Harrenhal to settle who would follow the aged Jaehaerys I. The lords passed over Princess Rhaenys and her son in favor of Rhaenyra's father, Viserys. The realm had spoken, and it had spoken for the male line. Remember that judgment. It would one day be turned against the very girl who watched her father rise upon it. In 103, after the conquest, the old king died, and Viserys was crowned. Rhaenyra, scarcely 6 years old, became a princess of the realm in full. These were her golden years. Her father doted upon her without limit, and the court learned to call her the realm's delight. She claimed her dragon while still a girl, the great she-dragon Syrax, named for a goddess of old Valyria, and rode her through the skies above the capital. She served as her father's cupbearer, pouring wine even at the small council, charming visiting lords with her wit. The small folk loved her. The court adored her. And no one loved her attention more than her uncle, Prince Daemon, that dashing and dangerous rogue who lavished her with gifts and praise. But then everything changed. In 105 after the conquest, Aemma Arryn died bringing forth a son, and the infant followed her into the grave within a day. Viserys was shattered. Now Rhaenyra was not merely his favorite, she was all he had left. And so the king did a thing no king had done before. He named his daughter his heir, setting aside his own brother Daemon, who had long expected the crown for himself. The great lords of the realm were summoned to King's Landing and made to kneel and swear sacred oaths to uphold Rhaenyra's right to the Iron Throne. The Lannisters knelt, the Starks knelt, the Baratheons knelt, Daemon himself knelt. Even the Hightowers bent the knee and swore. It was the first time in history a woman had been named heir before the whole realm. Yet beneath the ceremony lay a flaw the king refused to see. Custom, and the very council that had raised him up, favored sons over daughters. Viserys trusted that oaths alone would bind men's hearts. They would not, and this is where the seeds of ruin were quietly sown. Daemon, for his part, did not bear his loss gracefully. His arrogance grew unchecked, and when he raised a cup to toast a dead infant prince as the heir for a day, the cruelty of it earned him exile from court. He sailed to the Stepstones and carved out a kingdom of his own among the rocks and pirates. But his eyes ever drifted back to his niece. The greatest scandal came around 112, after the conquest. Daemon, some say, took the maiden Rhaenyra into the streets of King's Landing in disguise and led her at last to a house of pleasure, where he began to teach her the ways of love. What truly happened that night, no one can say. Mushroom the Fool claims Daemon took her maidenhead entirely. Septon Eustace writes that the two lay together, and that Daemon then went to the king to ask for her hand. Yet Rhaenyra herself would later swear before the faith that she remained a maiden untouched, and some hold nothing passed between them but a single stolen kiss. The truth was buried with all three of them. What is certain is the king's fury. Daemon was already wed to Lady Rhea Royce of Runestone, a wife he openly despised, and Viserys would not hear of the match. Daemon was banished once more, and the door to that union slammed shut. Meanwhile, the court had quietly transformed. The hand of the king, Sir Otto Hightower, had set his own daughter Alicent before the lonely widower king. Alicent wed Viserys and bore him sons, Aegon, then Helaena, then Aemond, then Daeron. Suddenly the realm had true-born princes, and a faction rose around them who whispered that a son must surely come before a daughter. Rhaenyra and Alicent had once been close as sisters. Now they were rivals, and the court fractured into two camps. The Blacks, who stood for Rhaenyra, and the Greens, who stood for Alicent and her sons, named for the colors the two women had once worn to a tourney. And this is where the legend turns dark. To bind the most powerful houses together, Rhaenyra was wed in 114, after the conquest, to Sir Laenor Velaryon, son of the famed sea snake, Lord Corlys Velaryon, and of Princess Rhaenys, the queen who never was. It joined Targaryen and Velaryon dragonblood with the wealth and the great fleet of Driftmark. Yet it was a marriage of duty and not desire, for Laenor was known to prefer the company of men, and most of all his companion, a young knight called the Knight of Kisses. The wedding ended in blood. During the celebrations, that companion was slain in the melee by Ser Criston Cole, once Laenor's friend. Why Cole struck him down, the histories dispute. Some say Cole had been Rhaenyra's lover and was scorned by her. Others say it was she who tempted him, and he, an honorable knight sworn to chastity, refused her. Whatever the cause, Criston Cole turned green that day and became Rhaenyra's most bitter and unrelenting enemy. In the years that followed, Rhaenyra bore three sons: Jacaerys, called Jace, Lucerys, called Luke, and Joffrey. But here lies the scandal that would shadow her forever. All three boys were brown of hair, brown of eye, and snub of nose. Not one carried the silver and the gold of Valyria as a true Velaryon child should. The whispers spread like fire. The boys, men murmured, were no Velaryons at all, but the sons of Sir Harwin Strong, the mighty knight called Breakbones, with whom the princess was rumored to share a bed. The Greens would forever name them only the Strongs, a slander to mark them baseborn. Did Rhaenyra betray her marriage vows? Fire and Blood never tells us plainly. Septon Eustace believed the boys baseborn. The Crown and Rhaenyra herself swore them true-born until the end. Only the color of their hair stands witness, and hair cannot testify in any court. Then, in 120, after the conquest, Harwin Strong and his father perished together in a great fire at Harrenhal. A blaze many believed was no accident, but the work of Harwin's own crippled brother, hungry for the lordship. The death only deepened the suspicions that clung to Rhaenyra's children. That same year, Rhaenyra's husband Laenor died as well, slain in a quarrel at a market, supposedly by a former companion. Yet few believed the simple tale. Most whispered that Daemon had arranged the killing so that he might at last have the woman he had always wanted. And by chance or by design, Daemon's own unwanted wife had died at the very same time, thrown from her horse in the Vale. The two were free, and swiftly, scandalously, they wed at Dragonstone. Uncle and niece, the two greatest dragon riders in the world, joined at last. Together, they had two more sons, Aegon the Younger and little Viserys. And these two, unlike the elder three, were silver of hair and unmistakably Valyrian. The contrast spoke louder than any accusation ever could. As the Greens tightened their grip on the court, Rhaenyra withdrew to Dragonstone with her husband and her dragon-riding sons, keeping her own court in exile while her father slowly failed upon his throne, his body wasting, his will refusing to face the storm he had brewed. And then, in 129, after the conquest, King Viserys died quietly in his sleep. The Greens moved within hours. They concealed the king's death from the realm. Queen Alicent, Ser Otto, Ser Criston Cole, and the cunning Larys Strong gathered in secret and resolved to crown not Rhaenyra, but her half-brother Aegon. Alicent claimed the king had changed his heart upon his deathbed and named his son. There is little truth in it, and the tale was almost certainly invented. When the old master of coin objected, he did not survive the night. And before the realm knew its king was even dead, Aegon II was crowned in the Dragon Pit before a roaring crowd. Word reached Dragonstone like a thunderbolt. Rhaenyra was heavy with child when she learned of her father's death and her own usurpation, and the shock brought on her labor too soon. She lost the babe, a daughter she named Visenya, the first of the many griefs the coming war would heap upon her. She herself nearly died, but rise she did. Upon Dragonstone, Rhaenyra was crowned queen, wearing her own father's crown, a deliberate claim to legitimacy. She raised the black and red banner of her house and gathered her black council. Daemon at her side, the sea snake, Princess Rhaenys, and her loyal sons. The dance of the dragons had begun. She sent her sons forth as envoys upon Dragonback. Jacaerys flew north to win the loyalty of Winterfell, the Vale, and beyond. Lucerys was sent south to Storm's End to treat with Lord Boros Baratheon. But already the harshness was creeping in, when a Velaryon kinsman dared to claim Driftmark for himself and called her sons bastards aloud. He was condemned and put to death by Daemon's own hand, and others who spread the tale were silenced cruelly. Was this justice, or the first true crack in the realm's delight? At Storm's End, young Lucerys found his uncle Aemond already there, mounted upon Vhagar, the oldest and most monstrous dragon alive. As Luke flew away through a gathering storm on his small dragon Syrax, Aemond gave chase. Aemond would later swear he meant only to frighten the boy, that the dragons slipped beyond his control. But control or no, Vhagar fell upon them, and Lucerys and his dragon were lost to the sky and the sea. The first prince to die in the dance. When the news reached Dragonstone, Rhaenyra was undone with grief. And from that grief came a darkness that would stain her cause forever. Daemon set in motion a deed so foul it would never be forgiven. Two hirelings, remembered only as blood and cheese, crept into the Red Keep and took the life of the young son of King Aegon and Queen Helaena, after forcing the helpless mother to make an unspeakable choice. Helaena was broken by it and never truly lived again. How much Rhaenyra knew, how much she approved, the histories cannot say. But the death of a child stained her side of the ledger. The war widened into horror. At Rook's Rest, Princess Rhaenys and her great dragon were slain, and Rhaenyra lost her wisest and most steadfast ally. At the Battle of the Gullet, her son Joffrey perished trying to join the fight. Another son gone, another piece of her heart torn away. To crew her riderless dragons, Rhaenyra called for Dragonseeds, the baseborn children of Targaryen blood, to claim the great beasts. Hugh Hammer, a dark-haired giant of a man, took the mighty Vermithor. Ulf the White claimed Silverwing. A girl called Nettles tamed the wild sheep-stealer. But this desperate gambit sowed treachery, and Rhaenyra's growing suspicion poisoned even her closest bonds. Convinced that Daemon and the girl Nettles had grown too close, she ordered the Dragonseed put to death. The lord she charged with the deed warned the girl instead, and Nettles fled. The realm's delight was becoming something the realm would no longer recognize. For a brief moment, fortune turned. With Aegon hidden and gravely wounded and his cause in disarray, Rhaenyra's dragons ruled the skies. The gates of King's Landing opened, and Rhaenyra entered her city in triumph, and sat the Iron Throne at last. They say the ancient blades of that throne cut her even as she claimed it, an omen the small folk would long remember. But the crown she had bled a lifetime for turned to ash in her hands. To pay her debts and fund her war, she laid heavy taxes upon a hungry city, seized the wealth of her enemies, and demanded the heads of those who had betrayed her. The small folk who had once cheered the realm's delight now spat her name in the streets and likened her to Maegor the Cruel, come again, the harshest king the realm had ever known. When even the loyal sea snake counseled mercy, she had him cast into a cell, and so lost the last great ally she had. Hunger and fear and war had brought the city to the edge, and a doomsday prophet called the Shepherd whipped the small folk into believing the dragons were demons sent to damn them all. One terrible night, the mob stormed the dragon pit. In the chaos, men and beasts alike perished by the thousand, and great dragons died in their chains. Even Rhaenyra's own Syrax, the dragon she had ridden since girlhood, was lost. The queen was now without her crown's love, without her city's loyalty, and without the dragon that had been her wings since childhood. Rhaenyra fled, away from the riot, away from the city, back at last toward Dragonstone, her ancestral seat and her final refuge. She did not yet know that her husband Daemon had already fallen in his legendary duel above the God's Eye, taking his nephew and the great Vhagar down into the deep waters with him. She came home a widow, though she could not be certain of it, a queen with almost nothing left. But Dragonstone held one final betrayal. For Aegon II had been smuggled to that very island, broken and burned but living, hidden away with his own scarred dragon, Sunfire. The garrison turned against their queen. Rhaenyra was seized by men who had once been sworn to her. They brought her before the half-brother who hated her, the crippled king consumed by years of grief and rage. And there, to make his vengeance complete and total, Aegon gave her to his dragon. Sunfire devoured her, and cruelest of all, her son Aegon, the boy of barely 10 years, was made to watch. She was 33 years old. The girl the whole realm had once sworn to obey ended as a horror whispered of by candlelight. So was she hero, monster, or a woman broken upon a crown the world would not let her wear? The histories never agreed, and perhaps that is her truest legacy. Munkun's official telling will not even number her among the kings. The Greens remembered her only by a vile name. Her loyalists called her the Queen Who Was. She is styled the half-year queen. For the few short months she truly reigned. She was the realm's delight, and she was the queen the histories revile. And somehow she was both. Yet here the final turn. For all her enemies' triumph, it was Rhaenyra's blood that prevailed. Aegon II was soon poisoned by his own, and the silver-haired boy who had watched his mother die rose to take the throne as Aegon III. Rhaenyra's line, not Alicent's, would hold the Iron Throne for generations to come. But that boy never recovered from what he had seen. He grew into a grim and haunted king who could not bear the sight of a dragon. And under his long reign, the last of the great dragons withered and died. The cost of the whole dance was written forever upon a child's face. From first breath to last, that was Rhaenyra Targaryen.